Welcome to Smart Brown Voices, your weekly podcast featuring diverse voices from around the world, giving you insights on how others made it big in their respective fields. Now sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready to be inspired. And don't forget to use hashtag #SmartBrownVoices to share insights, moments of wisdom, and things from the show that inspire you. And now, here's your host, social media nerd and technology activist, Mr. Mike Street.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Mike Street back, and this is episode 5 of Smart Brown Voices. And today we have a special guest who's, in the legal field. And so, André, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Hey, hello, everybody. My name's André Travieso. I'm actually an attorney. I've been an attorney now for 15 years. I've had my own practice for 12 of those years. Before I started my own practice, I worked at several corporate law firms doing corporate finance and some mergers and acquisitions and things of that nature. Why I decided to become an attorney? Actually, after I graduated from Columbia University, I did some volunteering for a couple of political campaigns in New York. And at that point, I knew that just having an undergrad degree wasn't going to be sufficient enough for me to do some of the things that, I thought I wanted to do. And I just started talking to a bunch of different people that were, whether they were, part of the Senate or state Senate or, also volunteering at these campaigns. And the one common thread was that a lot of these high-powered people, these, people with money, people with influence, had law backgrounds. A bunch of them had, the majority of them had law degrees. Now, not only, while they had these law degrees, a lot of them weren't practicing law. They had the degree, but they were doing different things. They were businessmen, they were politicians, things of that nature. And, that became sort of like really attractive to me because I was trying to decide between a business and a law degree. And when I, saw that the law degree allowed me the flexibility to not only be a lawyer, but one day, be my own boss, which I've been doing now for 12 years, but also open so many different avenues for me, whether it was politics, whether it was sports, whether it was television, whether it was finance. So ultimately, that was the main reason why I decided to go to law school instead of business school.
Now, for all of you guys that are listening, Andre's a little modest, but he's, working a lot of, important cases out there. He also works heavily in the, in the sports community. You work with a lot of different boxers that you, find across the world and help them, negotiate their contracts, in the United States. And isn't it true that you've never lost a case?
Well, I've never lost a case as far as when I've went on trial, when I've defended defendants in either commercial litigation or criminal defense work. It's been about 6 or 7 years that I've been doing trial work as well, and I haven't lost a trial yet. The way it works is usually there's a lot of negotiations that are involved in, with criminal defense, a lot of dealing with prosecutors, a lot of dealing with other lawyers. Same thing when you're representing. I represent a bunch of small corporations, small businesses, and things of that nature. And it's usually a lot of give and take between lawyers, a lot of give and take between judges and prosecutors and things of that nature. One of the things that really set me up for some of the things that I'm doing today was the experience that I had when I worked at some of these major law firms in New York, where I was dealing, I was part of teams that, were dealing with multi-million, multi-billion type of deals. And I got a solid background in not only negotiations, but also drafting contracts. With that, sometimes, I talk to people about what I'm doing and to the outside world, it seems so glamorous, but The work itself sometimes isn't as glamorous. I do work with a bunch of boxers. It allows me the opportunity, to be around glitzy situations, being in Vegas. I do a bunch of traveling outside of the country, recruiting boxers, negotiating contracts, negotiating production deals, management deals, and things of that nature. So, that work is it's legal, hard, strenuous work. But, once the foundation is set and once the contracts are established and all the terms and things of that nature are established, then, the show must go on after that. And that's sort of where the glitzy, more exciting things come up. And, usually it's what people don't see behind the curtain, but behind the curtain is a lot of hard work, not too glamorous, but it's that work that usually leads to the more exciting things.
Well, you work on, a lot of different contract work. So, talk to us a little bit how you work with, small businesses. Like, I think all of us out there kind of need some legal help. But I guess, they're often intimidated by the prices or, just everything that comes with dealing with a lawyer. So talk to us a little bit how you kind of deal with small businesses.
My motto always is, if I can start with someone who's, maybe doesn't have a lot of money, but has a vision. There's certain ways that I handle that. We can do things on an hourly basis where, I have a bunch of clients who come in, hire me, and tell me, listen, I have X amount of dollars. So how many hours can you give me? And based on what they need and how much money they have, I tell them I can give you 5 hours, I can give you 10 hours. And at that point, whatever a small business needs, I will, whatever time, the money that they have, the amount of time that I have is what I help them with. And, each client has different needs. You know what I mean? So some of them really come in and need help starting from scratch. They need me to incorporate them. They need me to, they have 1 or 2 employees. They need me to set up partnership agreements for them. They need me to set up bylaws for their business, a bunch of different things. My client base sort of runs the gamut from the professional type of boxers. I have several authors that have published books. I have some corporations that have as many as 20 people, and I pretty much do all their contract work, all their litigation work. But then I also have, I just did something for a gentleman in Harlem that just opened up his barbershop. And, he has 1 partner. So, he came to me, didn't have as much money, but, I set up his corporation, I set up his bylaws, I sat down with him and his other partner, I set up a partnership agreement between them. I set up, part of that partnership agreement is, what each person has to, what their responsibilities are on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis, on a daily basis. What you want to do as a small business, you want to get a lawyer who will sit down with you, try to figure out what your needs are, try to set you up so that you can be most successful. But as important, you want to sit down with a lawyer who will also help you foresee if things start to go wrong. Because, like life, we hope for the best, but, we also need to plan for the worst. And, in business, I have found that, so many people have come to me who have started some sort of venture, whether on their own or with a friend or with a partner, and a year, 2 years down the line, things aren't progressing the way they had envisioned or the way they had planned or how they agreed, and now there are problems.
Yeah.
So what I try to do with people, like, let's sit down, let's have the hard conversation, especially when there's, multiple partners or multiple people in the business. Let's sit down and have these hard conversations now as far as, like, if something goes wrong, what's the exit strategy, what your responsibility is going to be as we transition to you walking away, and you can walk away scot-free, or, you're going to have to buy yourself out, or, you feel that some of this content is yours, and this other person feels that content is theirs.
Yeah.
I want to try to sit down with a client or clients, early on when things are still good. And, let's talk about it. And, it's sometimes it's really uncomfortable conversations and uncomfortable scenarios that you need to talk about.
Like having your paperwork is, so super important. And I know we've had this discussion because I still don't have all my paperwork worked out yet. But, but that's one of the things that'll just fuck you up as a business if you don't have like all of your partnerships, because as in business, people can sometimes catch feelings and sometimes it just doesn't work out and you just have to have it documented. And so that's why, people would definitely come to you and you use your services and your expertise to really help them. I guess kind of forecast and project, what could, you have to always plan for the worst.
Definitely. And as a single person or, someone who doesn't have a lot of money, but, wants to start a small business, you also want to have that distinct line between you and your business, because you can set it up where, your business is its own breathing entity.
Yeah, you don't want the tax man to come get your own personal money.
Exactly. And the same thing with, if someone gets upset, you said someone catches feelings and they want to sue you or something, you want to make sure that they're suing the company.
Yeah.
So that they specifically, only have access to company funds and not suing you and having the opportunity to go after you specifically and the money that you put aside, on a personal level. So, those are some of the things that you want to sit down with someone and you want to bang these things out, early on.
And it's scary, like you said, it's, having those tough conversations with your clients. But, in the long run, if you really want to be in business and be serious about, everything that you're doing, like you need, all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed and all the paperwork. But it also, I know like we've talked about this too, like when it comes to like family also, and I know you do stuff like that too. So if it's, people out there who are listening, you also need to make sure you have your paperwork when it comes to, your family matters as well. So all those other deeds and documents and everything else, André can handle that too.
Definitely. A big issue now is, also setting up wills and setting up, medical proxies and living wills. We think of ourselves, and I'm still guilty of it as well, where, I think I'm going to live forever. Yeah. And, that I'm going to be, that I'm going to be okay. And that, but, as you get older, your relationships, you start to accumulate property and assets and things of that nature. It's best that, you sit down and you send, and, these wills can change. You sit down and set up a will today doesn't mean that actually that tomorrow or a year from now, 2 years from now, certain things change. Those wills are easily amended. You know what I mean? They're easily changed. And it's important that you take ownership of your life in as many ways as possible. You know what I mean? So, you mentioned as far as business and partnerships and things of that nature that, that you have to have the honest and hard conversations with your partners. But you know what? You also have to have the honest and hard conversations with yourself. And a lot of times, a lot of people don't do that. They don't. And I'm like, listen, I see how someone treats themselves. I see the friends that they have. I see the things that they're doing. I see how they're handling business. And I'm like, if I see that a person is cheating themselves, I'm like, so more than likely down the line, that person may, cheat me or cheat something else. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Where I'm like, if you're not taking care of yourself, my feeling is like, oh, then, is that person going to take care of all the other things in life? You know what I mean? So I found that a lot where, like, people just don't, they're quick to want to take care of everything else and not take care of themselves. So, you have to take care of yourself, not only in business, but also in your personal life. And I find it really, really important now, no matter how young you are, once you, set up a will, set up some sort of medical document where, God forbid, end up in the hospital and someone needs to make certain decisions that you can make. You can lay all of that stuff out for yourself ahead of time so that, again, if these things ever come up, you have it all in writing. You have the person there that you actually, it's not a burden on the people that are around you, that love you, that need to make decisions because you've already made certain decisions for yourself. So, again, that not only, my law firm not only can help you with the business side of things, but, as far as the personal side of things, we also, are really interested in helping people with that as well.
And I wanted to talk to you about bloggers and the whole wild, wild west of the internet and intellectual property and all this other stuff. So a couple of weeks ago on my Facebook feed, this girl I was following on Facebook, and she owns a t-shirt business. So she had posted kind of a rant, which kind of went into, what I wanted to talk about today. So basically, she created a t-shirt. She sent it to NeNe Leakes. NeNe wore it and posted a picture of her wearing the t-shirt on her Instagram. And, so it got a lot of, attention, and it says "girl bye," which is kind of like one of NeNe's catchphrases. So like a month or two later, NeNe decides to come out with her own t-shirt, which looks very similar to the girl's kind of design and font lettering. And so now NeNe's selling a very similar t-shirt to the girl, on her social media channels now. So I know, and NeNe actually set Tease in the Trap a cease and desist letter, because now NeNe's trying to stake claim to, the phrase "girl bye."
Okay.
What is going on here, and how do you protect yourself from people, kind of just jacking your shit from, the internet?
Right. And, it's, you mentioned the Wild Wild West, and that's exactly what the internet is today. There are certain, the government and lawmakers are trying to catch up. You know what I mean? And they've actually, there's a U.S. copy law that has been around forever. However, just recently, over the last couple of years, the copyright laws, are trying to go digital. There's something called, I think, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act that the government has implemented, because right now, as far as, copyright laws, trademark laws online, they're like years and years behind as far as, with social media and blogs and things of that nature. Because, these sort of things are just so, they're just moving so fast today. You know what I mean? That, I saw that article that you had sent me about the whole thing with the T-shirt. And, that goes towards, again, I don't know whether or not the original owner of the T-shirt company had went and trademarked, that phrase and that font. But pretty much that was like her protection.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Trademark, now there are different things between copyright and trademark. A trademark, specific towards, the T-shirt and the phrase and things of that nature. You use a trademark when you're trying to protect a word, a phrase, a symbol, something that identifies your company. And, you want a symbol that goes along with your company. That's where, you want to trademark something. An example of that is, today, Windows. You know what I mean? At this point, everybody knows what Windows are. The same thing. The same thing with McDonald's. The same thing with Google. These are all things. Especially Windows and Google. These are all pretty recent things. You know what I mean? But they went and these things today, they're trademarked. You know what I mean? And there's an example. I can give you an example that maybe your audience will be able to understand. But the Eddie Murphy movie Coming to America, when he's working at the burger right at McDonald's, okay, and McDonald's, it was the Mac this, the Mac that. Obviously, in real life, McDonald's would shut that down immediately. You know what I mean? Because he was That's trademark infringement. You know, what I mean, he was, and one of the things with trademark is that as a company, I've established a brand, I've established a saying, I've established symbol that goes with that saying, and now someone else comes along, and I did look at what you had sent me with that article. It's going to be interesting to see what the courts say about it, because it's almost identical. You know what I mean? Yeah. Hopefully the T-shirt company had done all their due diligence ahead of time, and had done what they needed to do legally, and got all the protection that they needed with the trademark and things of that nature. Just reading the article very quickly, at the top of my head, I'm like, you know what? They may have some sort of legitimate case against this woman that went ahead and pretty much, as far as I see it, stole from them. Because the things that you want to trademark are how fancy things are. If you have a catchphrase or something, you know what I mean? Again, that's one of the thresholds that, as far as with that case, there's usually three things that the courts look at. Right? How fancy the mark is, or whether it was generic or not. You know what I mean? So
they now grab some fonts off the net and fill up a T-shirt that said "Girl Bye." They may not have a case, but if they kind of did something more custom and original.
Exactly. Exactly. The whole thing with copyright, trademark, and things of that nature, and where I say, the web has kind of become the wild, wild west, is because even before the web, sometimes it's just not hardcore law out there that you can point to. There's a lot of gray. You know what I mean? So that's why the courts will use 3 and 4 different things: how descriptive of a mark of things are, how fancy of a mark something is, or whether or not it's just sort of a generic situation where, that, those words, anybody can use them. It's nothing funky about them. It's not, they're not being used in a certain way, or sort of vernacular that, you can point to, like, I put that out there. That's mine. You know what I mean? So, that's some of the things that, again, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, they may have a case against this woman because she didn't do much to change it, and she pretty much just used the same, pretty much the same phrase, and just like after she got told, she changed the font. So they may have a shot against her, but it's going to be interesting to see whether or not.
On a reality show, and say, like Nene has, a couple of different phrases that she says all the time. Like she says "girl bye," she says "boop," and so should Nene be going out there to trademark all that stuff so that she can make that money?
She should. You know what I mean? Obviously, she has some lawyers. I saw that in the article referred to that. She had sent out some cease and desist letters, and more than likely those were lawyers that send it out for. And it's funny because I don't watch any reality television, so like I had no idea who that person was. You know what I mean? Whatsoever. But and again, that's the sometimes being a lawyer. That's how it works. Because I have done work with 2 or 3 other people in reality shows. You know what I mean? I've done contract work. I had a client who she was filmed and she was on television. They never got consent from her. She didn't want to have anything to do with this reality show. And, come to find out, it's a pretty big reality show. It's really, really popular. It rates well. And the storyline, wasn't a storyline that she wanted to be part of, So I literally had to send a letter, a cease and desist letter to a major television network. Sat down with a lawyer, sat down with a producer, asked them to produce certain things, certain waivers, certain consent forms that, my client had assured me that she had not signed, and sure enough, she hadn't. And they pretty much had to edit the whole episode. They sent me a cut of the episode, and while I wasn't totally able to forced them not to show the entire episode. But what they did was they bleeped out her name. There was some pictures that they were going to show with her. They got those out. So, again, it goes towards so many different, the law goes so many different avenues, things. That was another weird thing that, once I went to law school, after my first year of law school, everything I looked at now, I looked at it really, really differently. I looked at it as far as like, is that acceptable? Is that okay? Or just everything turned legal for me. And I'm not as bad as I once was, but early on when it was all so new to me, it's amazing how, sometimes I tell people I'm a lawyer, and right away, I get this negative reaction. And I'm like, listen, you know what? Take my card, because, listen, maybe one day you run into millions of dollars and your company becomes this huge company and you need help with you can use lawyers for so many different things, not only good, but bad, but, great things, just so many different avenues that the law pretty much, in everything we do, there's some sort of involvement with law. So, and obviously the internet and social media is huge right now, and the way you should protect your ideas and things of that nature, all goes towards the law.
It's funny because, so yesterday I was reading an article about Beyonce, and so someone on Etsy. So Etsy is a website where people they do a lot of arts and crafts and they sell them on the site. So someone did a mug, and so instead of putting Beyonce on it, it says fiance, and so it has a little ring on it. So they were talking about how Beyonce sent Etsy a cease and desist order because she wanted, the mug taken off. It doesn't have her name on it, but it's very, very similar, to her, I guess, to her brand, because it just says fiance. And it had, her popular song is, if you like it, you should have put a ring on it,
Right.
So it's just funny, how all this intellectual property, things are coming, really up in the media, because people are just going crazy and selling all kinds of stuff, on the internet now. There's another girl, she runs a website, and so she's selling all this kind of Beyonce style sayings on these different tumblers and T-shirts and mugs, that are from her songs, but she's not attributing them, like in her latest album. One of her popular lines is "I woke up like this," So this girl is selling T-shirts that say "I woke up like this," and it's totally from Beyonce, but she never says Beyonce's name anywhere on her site, but she's making money, off of that phrase. So what is the legal precedent there? How do you get away with that kind of stuff?
I mean, you know what? People can get away with it if the subject or the company isn't made aware of these things, or don't have certain quote unquote watchdogs or things set up, to protect them, and most of these entertainers today, they're not just entertainers. Beyonce is just not a singer. She's just not an actress. She's a brand.
Yeah.
She's a corporation. Same thing with Jay-Z and Apple Computer. You think of Apple, you just don't think about, computers anymore. It's so much larger today.
Yeah.
So, a lot of it is, how do you protect your brand? How do you protect your image? How do you protect your ideas? Because you have to get these things online. You have to get them out to the public. But then you also have to set up situations where, you can protect that, and you don't have general public using those things the way they want to use them. And again, that goes towards, the four main options that you have to protect your ideas are trademarks, copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. You know what I mean? Where you have to, before you put these things out, you have to sit down and think about these things and think about what you want to protect and how you want to protect it. So again, you need a lawyer to help you sit down and figure out, Do I need trademark protection here? Do I need copyright protection here? Do I need a patent here? Because you don't want people to infringe on certain things. And great examples of that. Actually, I read something today on, it may have been on ESPN or something, but the Nike and Air Jordan, they're being sued for copyright and trademark infringements because the actual Jordan brand, him with the ball jumping up his air, his legs are wide open, he's dunking the ball. That's actually some guy that worked for like Life magazine that took pictures of Jordan and specifically, this is his claim, specifically, had him jumping a certain way and, took a bunch of still pictures and sort of like made that it was a picture. And ultimately he granted Nike permission and maybe for 2 or 3 years to use, that silhouette. And so the first maybe 2 or 3 pair of Jordans didn't have that Jordan logo on the sneaker. It had it, I think the article says that it had it, inside or on the tongue or something. But then, I think that was 84. Then by 87, they started using it as the main brand, not only on the outside of the sneaker, but today, the Jordan brand is in baseball. It's Jeter was part of the Jordan brand. So it's just not basketball and sneakers anymore. It's a bunch of different things. And now this man, 20 years, 25 years later is saying, you know what, I gave you guys 2 years worth of permission to use it. And I gave you guys, permission to use it in a certain way. You guys ultimately have run with it. And now today, you see that logo, you know exactly what it is.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, now he's for his checks.
So now the man is looking, to cash in. Now that there may be certain things, and I'm not going to get into all the legal stuff that, may bar him from actually preventing the Nike from using that with the Jordan brand. But, again, it's things like that. Another thing is Apple. Apple is notorious and so well known in the legal industry for protecting their ideas. Apple is all about innovative ideas, innovative products. And, they're just hawks about the sort of agreements and contracts that they pretty much have all their employees sign. Where if you're an Apple employee, you may have, you're allowed to have, put certain stuff online, personal stuff. You may, if you want to blog, you got a personal blog, but you can't refer it to anything having to do with Apple. You know what I mean? If you mention anything with Apple or their products, stuff that you're working on that's still not out for public consumption, Apple is on you. You know what I mean? So, those are examples of, companies and ways that, sure, is Apple, sure, it's Nike, Adidas is another company that's well known for the sort of confidentiality agreements that they have their employees sign because they're so protective over, their ideas and their brand and what they're putting out in their products. But as a single person, you can do the same sort of things. The agreements and things of that nature don't have to be as well worded or as big as, say, an Apple or an Adidas, but you can put those sort of agreements together, for not a bunch of money. And
I think the easiest one is a non-disclosure if you're at least going to talk about some of your ideas, right?
Absolutely, and you have people, because I'm assuming that you're a blogger, you're putting stuff online, you have a website, you're working and you're coming across a bunch of different people. And early on, you want to get your ideas out there. You want your ideas to pick up traction, and you want people to think that your ideas are good ideas. But you also want to protect yourself from people stealing those ideas. So you can have them come in and, okay, we're going to work together, have them sign, a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement and letting them know that, what, when you're working with me, these are my corporation's ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And if you're working with me, I have a client, he's a DJ in New York for biggest Spanish-speaking radio station in New York. And he was in the process of negotiating a new contract with him. And at one point, he decided he was going to leave. And there were certain characters and certain skits that he had invented, while he worked at radio station X. He was trying to take him to radio station Y. And radio station X was like, no way. This was work part had done while you were here. Didn't matter that he invented it, that it was they were his babies. You know what? They were the companies. You know what I mean? So there was some other things that he had that some new material, and pretty much my advice to him was like, hold off on those. Don't put anything out until we get you. We get you out of the situation. You fulfill your contract and you move to the other radio station. And then at that point, you can start unveiling some of these things because, if you're working for somebody and they make you sign certain agreements, then, whatever you put out there while you're working for that company is technically theirs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, Tina Turner was the same way. She had to buy that name from her. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't her name. That was Ike's name. He came up with that name, and, after 20, 30 years when they broke up and she wanted to move on, he was like, you can go, but this name is mine. And you know what? She went to court, and she ultimately, had to buy that name because, so again, those are some of the things where, not for a bunch of money, small businesses or even, just regular people that are doing things, the ways that they can protect themselves so that, yes, they can put their ideas out there and, put themselves out there and, gain traction and become known and, hopefully, one day be a major brand, but also make sure that you're protecting it and that you're controlling how your stuff is put out there.
Yeah, I remember the Bratz dolls, because that was the designer of the Bratz dolls. He created the whole concept, but he worked at Mattel. Particularly, he worked on Barbie stuff. So he was making really good money off of the Bratz brand, but, ultimately Mattel was able to sue him and shut that whole company and the whole Bratz line of dolls down. So, sometimes you just have to keep your really good ideas close to you.
Right, absolutely.
So, André, how can everybody get in touch with you if they want to, get some of that Travieso law help?
That's one of the things that I also need to do for myself and for my brand. 'Cause at times I get so caught up with just the work that I don't do enough to market, my brand and my law office and things of that nature. But, the easiest way right now to get in touch with me, it's funny. And Mike, this, I got on Twitter, I've maybe been on Twitter maybe 6, 7, 8 months. You know what I mean? I had never Twitter. I had never done Facebook. I have a website that really needs to be updated, but, online, my website is www.traviesolaw.com. I'm on Twitter at André Travieso. You go online, you put in my name. I have a sort of distinct last name, so if you put in my last name, I usually come up pretty quickly. So, yeah, people can find me online, www.traviesolaw.com. You can find me on Twitter as well, one first and last name. Not on Facebook yet. I'm getting pressured by everybody to get on Facebook, so I'm going to have to do that soon. But you can find me online or on Twitter.
Awesome. So, André, you recently ran a marathon. What did you learn from that experience? And it was a half marathon, right? It's 13 miles?
Yeah, I did a half marathon in Philly, I think in November. And actually, it's funny that you asked me that question. Yesterday, I signed up for the full 26-mile marathon in New York. So I was born and raised in New York. I'm originally from the Bronx, so my family's from the Bronx. I decided, you know what, if I'm going to run a marathon, a full marathon, I'm going to run it in New York. So, I just signed up for that yesterday. But, the marathon, it was, just setting a goal for yourself. You know what I mean? And I do CrossFit, and I've been doing courses for a little over 2 years. And I just found myself, not really wanting to do CrossFit anymore, just kind of somewhat getting bored with the programming and things of that nature. So I was like, what can I do, to jumpstart, my energy to work out again? And as a kid, I boxed for 7 years. I had maybe over 40 or 50 fights. I traveled to 2 or 3 different countries. I was on some national teams. I did that as I started at the age of 9, and I did it through my teenage years. And then while I was at Columbia, I did it for another 2 years. So I had always jogged, but I'd always run, 4 miles, 5 miles, but, I never done a marathon. So I decided, you know what, let me start with a half marathon, which was 13 miles. I had never run 13 miles all at once, so I started there. But, really, again, that goes towards, and it started, and I tell people all the time, my favorite sport is boxing because, as a 9-year-old, I remember being afraid of the dark. And I remember, after I started to box, that all of a sudden, I was no longer afraid of the dark. I remember, getting up in the middle of the night and not wanting to turn on the lights in the hallway and in the bathroom because I was no longer afraid of the dark. So what that did was, it gave me confidence. It gave me, not only confidence as far as I'm no longer afraid of the dark, but, it gave me confidence in life. It gave me confidence in school. It gave me confidence in corporate America. It gives me confidence today when I'm dealing with clients. It gives me confidence today when, I'm standing in front of a judge and I'm arguing certain points, So sort of the whole marathon thing was parallel in a lot of ways in that, a lot of the things that boxing taught me that I've been able to transition over to my life. Same thing with, running a marathon, and now I'm going to have to run the 26. And it's, what? You make a goal for yourself, you start training towards it, and what does that training mean? Having a regiment, running sometimes when you didn't want to run. I was actually a week or 2 before the Dominican Republic. Mike knows we were away. A week or 2 before the race. I was away on vacation. Mike was there, in the Dominican Republic. Mike saw me. I was getting up in the morning and running because, the race was in 2 weeks. You don't understand, I would much rather have, been sitting down drinking. But I'm like, you know what, let me run for this hour.
So it's all good.
But it was, a goal that I set for myself. Yeah. I trained hard, and, there was a reward at the end, you know what I mean, where I was done with those 13 miles, and I'm like, man, I'm pretty positive that I could do the other 13. So, I just signed up for the New York City Marathon tomorrow. So, I'll start training in a couple of months, and I'm off and running.
So the Traviesos, I've been friends with the Traviesos for too many years to probably count, because Andre's wife, Karen Travieso, who will be on the next episode, 2 of the smartest people I've ever met, but also, they became kind of my fitness spirit animals in a way because, they started juicing over the summer. And so that's when I was like, well, that doesn't sound that hard. And and so I think at that time, I was probably 308 pounds. So today, I'm actually happy to say that I'm 256 pounds. So I've really, substantially been able to lose a lot of weight. But it's not from the juicing, because I probably only juice once a day, but I just go to the gym every day now. So I think, like you were saying, just having that regimen and being able to, because I feel like I can, I focus a lot better, when I run or do the elliptical or just go to the gym. So just that 1 hour, I kind of can disconnect from the internet and everything else going on. And it gives me a chance to think. Actually, when I'm in the gym, I'm listening to a podcast. So that's kind of like how I got the inspiration to do this show also, So I have to thank thank you, André and Karen, for helping to, inspire us to be, better about our health. Even though Karen is a serial dieter, she's been with every doctor forever.
I have never ever worried about diets, and now I end up on all these diets that Karen ends up on as well, because she's usually one that's cooking. But you know what? Karen called me about the juicing. She was away in California, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm doing CrossFit. I'm fine. I don't need the juice. I'm good. You know what I mean? And ultimately, I'm like, you know what? Let me help her. With something that she wanted to do. And she initially wanted to do 60 days because she had seen some documentary, and the guy had done it for 60
Fat, Sick, and Dead is the documentary.
And I'm like, listen, I'm going to give you 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you know what I mean? I can do, another 2 weeks. I'll do that. And you know what? After those first, 3 or 4 or 5 days, 2 weeks came and went. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and we ended up doing 32 days. And you know what? I'm pretty positive that I'm probably going to juice. I saw Mike, and you've done a great job with it. You look, you've lost the weight. I heard that you're running now. You're going to the gym, and again, it's the juicing, the marathons, all the different things that we do. It's living your life with a purpose. Or what I say is, I live my life on purpose. You know what I mean? And that's where you can forge forward and, is living your life on purpose. So, you get up and you do things and you do them and you know why you're doing them and you take ownership of them. And, that's across the board. With my legal practice, with my running, with my friendships, with everything that I do. I try to live my life above board, and, I try to live my life on purpose, and I try to work hard, and I try to be earnest with people, and I give you 100%. And I think if you live your life that way, in business and in life, more times than not, at the end of the day, I go to bed at night and I'm happy. Like everyone else, there's hard times, there's stressful times. Sometimes things don't work out, the way I want them to work out. Sometimes I wish for certain things and they don't come true, but very few times do I go to bed with regret or deep down inside not being happy, because I'm like, you know what? I give myself 100%. Yeah. And with that, I give everybody else 100% one way or the other.
And I think for me, the biggest thing I learned is it's okay to fail, because I've been failing at all kinds of shit over the past years. But, it's, I think it's failing, but being able to experiment and try new stuff. And I think, just like with juicing and this podcast and, everything else, you have to, like one of our earlier guests said on our episode 1, which was Paul C. Brunson, he said, don't be afraid to invest in yourself. And I think that's what we're really doing is, just investing in ourselves. And it's not always monetary. It's really kind of just like looking at things from a different perspective and, charge forward with what you're doing. So, André, we're about to run out of time. So I wanted to ask you, and this is a question we ask all of our guests, what is your most favorite song right now that you're, jamming to? I know Karen's favorite song, but what's your favorite?
Karen stole that song from me. She's like the last 2 most favorite songs she stole from me, actually. Right now, the song that Karen stole from me was Latch. Yeah. And last summer I was killing that song. Karen got wind of it, and now I can't listen to it because she listens to it so much. But right now, the song that starts all my workouts and all my runs is Waves. I don't know who it's by. It's a remake, but it's called Waves. And I'm actually trying to keep it from Karen. Oh, okay. I don't want her to hear it too much, because once she gets a hold of it, then I'm gonna get sick of it. But
how many times did we play Latched? And when we were in the hotel room, probably 100. And André had to come in and push the mute button. It's like, don't play it anymore.
Exactly.
Well, Andre, thank you so much. This has been a great to hear your story, and I think we've learned a lot about a lot of stuff like intellectual property and why you need to get all your paperwork together. So everybody, I'll put all of Andre's information in the show notes so you can reach out to him if you need any legal help. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Andre, for being on this episode.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Smart Brown Voices with your host, Mr. Mike Street. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts and make sure to follow us on social media. This has been a Mr. Mike Street production. Join us next time for another edition of Smart Brown Voices and be inspired.
My face above the water, my feet can't touch the ground, and it feels like I can see the sands on the horizon every time you are not around, slowly drifting away, wave after wave, wave after wave, slowly drifting, and it feels like I'm drowning, pulling against the stream, pulling against the wave, wave after wave, wave after wave. Slowly drifting. My face above the water, my feet can't touch the ground, and it feels like I can see the sands on the horizon every time you are not around, slowly drifting away, wave after wave, wave after wave, slowly drifting, and it feels like I'm drowning, pulling against the stream, pulling against the